Good morning and welcome to another coffee conversation. This is Heidi. My name is Heidi Ellsworth and we are here with Roofers Coffee Shop. This morning we are going to be talking about something very important. We are going to be talking about very severe hail. And I tell you what, it is I can't believe how much work has been put in by so many people to really start understanding and protecting our buildings from the huge hailstorms that we are having on a regular basis. So today, this episode of Coffee Conversations is actually being sponsored by SOPREMA. And I want to say thank you to them. They are very active, and in fact, one of our main guests this morning is with SOPREMA, and they are working day in and day out to make sure that our buildings are being protected. So let's get started. First of all, I would like to introduce our guest this morning. I'm very excited about this. As I mentioned, Darren Perry, who is the Technical Support Manager with SOPREMA, is here today. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being on the show. We're really excited to hear about this.
Glad to be here.
And then I also wanted to welcome, and this is really a big deal. I'm very excited to have Aileen, Struble, and Chris Evans with KPost. And as you see, the #1 Dallas-Fort Worth commercial and residential roofing contractors. They have just absolutely an amazing company out of Dallas. I've had the honor of being there a couple times, watching what they're doing with technology and very severe hail and taking care of their customers. So Aileen and Chris, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you for having us, Heidi. Great to be here.
It's good to have you. Chris, hello. Thank you. Okay, are you hearing us all right? He will be. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, I wanted to remind everybody that this is a Q&A. This is all about your questions, and these wonderful folks here who are here today who have some amazing experience with hail and the systems and really understanding how to protect, how to bring this to your business and also how to protect your buildings. So be sure to ask your questions. You can ask them over on the side, raise your hand, or type your questions in, or chat. Megan Ellsworth is in the back, and she'll be bringing you over to ask your questions. You can either come on live with video, audio, or I'll ask the question, because we know it's early in some parts of this country right now. So let's get started. Let's start out first. And you know what? I really think we need to start from the very beginning, Darren. So can you kind of introduce yourself, but then also talk a little bit about what is very severe hail and what is going on with FM? Kind of lay the groundwork.
Okay, sure. A little bit about myself. I'm Technical Support Manager with SOPREMA US. And one of my roles is I'm in charge of the codes and approvals and testing programs here at SOPREMA. And that includes FM and FM approval testing programs. And one of those includes the very severe hail testing. And FM very severe hail, it's a test standard, and it's FM 4473. And that test standard was developed by FM to address issues with hail impact damages to their insured property. And previously they had a moderate hail and a severe hail rating. And based on damages and losses over the years, they saw the need to increase that standard. And for certain areas of the U.S., Texas, Oklahoma, that area, in the middle of the country that's exposed to severe hail events, they saw the need to require a higher impact resistance for roofing, specifically low slope roofing. So they developed this standard, which is an ice ball impact test standard. They basically the standard it requires the samples, the roofing samples, to be tested unconditioned, and then tested after 1,000 hours of UV exposure. And then after the 1,000 hours of UV exposure, samples would then, if they passed that, it would then be heat aged for 1,000 hours. And so it's a stepwise program, unconditioned, and then if it passes, of course, the UV exposure, then the heat aging exposure. And then each sample before it's tested, it's chilled down to 45 degrees Fahrenheit right before the ice balls are fired into the samples. So it's quite a rigorous test, and the test includes a 2-inch ice ball, preformed ice ball, 2 inches in diameter, weighs about 0.15 pounds for the ice ball, and it's fired out of a pneumatic cannon into the sample. And it's fired at about 53 to 58 feet per second. I'm sorry, about 152 to 160 feet per second speed, which produces about 53 to 58 foot-pounds of impact energy. Now, 53 to 58 foot-pounds of energy for the very severe hail test, that's much higher than the severe hail test, which is simply dropping a steel ball at about 22 foot-pounds of impact energy. So more than double the impact energy from this ice ball. And each sample, each time it's tested, there are at least three shots fired at the sample. One is in the field or the middle of the membrane. One shot is in a seam, and then one shot is at a stress plate. If there's a plate beneath that membrane, an ice ball will be fired into that plate. In fact, I've got a plate here to give you an idea of the kind of the impact energy. This was after the ice ball had fired into the membrane. You can see what it does to the plate. It puts a significant dent into it. So it's quite a bit of impact energy that goes into that. So the test is it's pretty rigorous test. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the FM test.
And how are you seeing that? I mean, kind of with, I think a lot of, we have obviously a bunch of contractors out here who are kind of wondering, what does that mean to me? How does that, they're testing it, the hail, and I've seen those hail tests before. That is pretty dang amazing. So what is it, Darren, how is this really affecting contractors?
Well, initially, when FM first implemented the standard, and it was primarily targeted at FM insured, folks that are insured by FM. They require that very severe hail rated assembly in those certain areas of the U.S. More in the center of the U.S. Like I said, Texas, Oklahoma. Can't remember some of the others. More in the maybe Kansas, I think might fit in there. But they require this, and the impact it had on contractors is you had only a limited number of approvals at first because it was a new standard, and so it started showing up, and building owners would require their roofs to meet this very severe hail standard, and there weren't very many approvals out there. So that was a real impact initially on the contractors.
Yeah, and so I want to, Chris, thank you. You're here. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Awesome. We love it. This world of live online. So I think kind of taking what Darren's talking about, and I know you and Aileen are constantly, I mean, your head estimators, director of estimating, senior estimator, and you see this all the time, and you're seeing this with your building owners. Chris, can you kind of start us off a little bit, just talking about what you're seeing as you're talking to building owners and how important this is really becoming, or
right.
has been?
So the first obstacle or hurdle is just probably confusion on the part of building owners. This is obviously new, which means people need to be educated on it. That by and large is the first and the hardest challenge, is to because there's inherent costs with making anything better. So now we're talking about upgraded materials, upgraded cover boards, different methods of installation. So all of a sudden we're shifting from the most economical way to doing things to potentially the most expensive way to do things to meet this very severe hail rating. So it's easier to have this conversation with people who are absolutely certain they are and informed that they are FM insured. those people who own the buildings on our remedial projects, they know exactly who have been through the process and can navigate the waters, and probably got notified that this was going to be an implementation in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and broader areas. So where it becomes very confusing is when we have construction projects that are new, and the design community is utilizing factory mutual as a basis of design. Oftentimes the architect will use it as a kind of a benchmark for compliance for a specific performance mark. And because we're in this region, they'll reference a very severe hail. It just leads us down some very twisting rabbit holes about, is the customer actually FM insured? Do they want the additional protection? Does the design community even know exactly what they're asking for when they ask for a very severe hail rated system?
Right.
So those have been the big challenges for us, is figuring out how to navigate the waters, after this has been implemented, with a small catalog of solutions that aren't, fully developed yet. We've seen some decent leniency in FM for, showing good intent, trying to adhere to certain kind of, I guess, prescribed good practices in terms of adhering a cover board, using upgraded cap sheets, because there a lot of the assemblies tested, they're just not all the way there. They don't have all the conditions and the depth of options. So, those have all been the challenges in a short, brief nutshell. It's just as soon as we're a couple years down the road and there's ample solutions and a fully informed customer base, this will become less and less of an issue, especially as the market adapts.
And always with the new testing, the new systems, and there's so many great products that are coming out, but still have to go through all that testing. And Aileen, I see you nodding, going, yes. How are you dealing with, kind of bringing such a new protocol or new type of systems to your, through your estimating?
Well, Chris touched on it. I do a lot of big new construction projects, and he's correct. The architects will insert a very severe hail requirement, and then the products listed or the specification the materials listed might not meet a very severe hail system. And so there's a lot of back and forth with architects and general contractors trying to explain the materials required, what options are currently available. So I do a lot of that, and budget different systems, trying to meet their pricing goals and still meet very severe hail. And I like Chris said, we've been able to get FM to bend a little bit on certain requirements. New materials are developed almost daily, and so we try to put together different systems and different costs and present those to the general contractors and the architects, so they kind of understand what's going on and whether their systems do meet FM or just FM criteria. So I try to give them as many options, system options, and budget numbers as I can. So that's what I've been encountering a lot in the last 3 years, and it's getting much better as architects start understanding the FM as opposed to just FM compliant or requirements, and the products are being understood more and being introduced into specifications more. But it's been a process, and SOPREMA, I know I've called their technical countless times for help, for advice, for products, for approvals on systems that an architect will insist upon, and everybody's been very accommodating and trying to work together to make the best possible outcome for the projects.
Yeah, and so what kind of are you hearing from, with all this new construction, what are you, besides the architects too, there's just so many people in that channel who you have to work with. What is some of the, as you said, the last 3 years, what are some of the results you're seeing from this? And also, what are some of the feedback from that end user on this?
I mean, we've had good feedback, and they're starting to understand what's required. And we have had some owners that have chosen to take a severe hail system instead of a very severe hail system when, as Chris noted, the cost is involved. And sometimes the cost is too much for some owners or some projects. So we find ways around it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really because you're trying to educate so many people while getting educated. So I want to remind everybody out there, we do actually have a question. And so I'm not sure, it's from Bill Collins. Good morning, Bill. I'm not sure if he's coming on, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this because it actually was exactly where we were just about ready to go to ask Darren. But Bill Collins is saying, does this apply to TPO roofing systems? And also ask if the regions of the country are laid out as well. So across the country, not just in the hail area. So Darren, we were going to kind of talk about this, the different systems, what it takes to put it all together. And with your experience of being with FM before being with SOPREMA, maybe you could address that question.
Yes, specifically TPO. Yes, there are several TPO options that do meet the FM very severe hail rating, and of course SOPREMA doesn't, we don't offer TPO, but the TPO people have been working very hard to get approvals. They have several now. One of the maybe the pitfalls or the obstacles that the single ply industry in general faced was getting a single ply to pass with a traditional roof board beneath the membrane. Failure, I'll talk a little bit about failure modes. The failure mode can be a couple of things. It can be breach of the membrane, the hailstone impacts, or the ice ball impacts the membrane and splits it. That's a failure mode commonly seen. Or it can break or crack the cover board. So the board beneath the membrane, if that cracks or breaks, FM deems that a failure. So the cover board plays a big role, a huge role in being able to pass the standard. So using a lot of the traditional materials out there, kind of as Chris and Aileen alluded to, gave them some challenges because a lot of the traditional things out there didn't meet the standard. Thus, you had to go up to a higher level, maybe more expensive roof. But our goal as SOPREMA was to take our traditional materials and find combinations that would be traditional, no new materials involved, just take our traditional materials and pass the standard. And that took a little heavier cover board. It took a thicker gypsum board, for example, a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch wouldn't pass. And our own board, our SOPREMA board, that required our 1/4 inch SOPREMA board as opposed to our thinner 1/8 inch. So there's a bit of a, Chris was right, there's a bit of a step up. You have to, the bottom, I guess, the most critical type materials don't always pass. TPO specifically, I think now there may be some approvals, but at one time there were very few approvals that included a metal stress plate beneath the membrane, because when the test was fired, when you fire the ice ball at the membrane and hit a stress plate, you can imagine when the ice ball hits this edge of this plate, and there's a single ply membrane over it, it would split or tear, damage the membrane. So that was an obstacle, and I know a lot of the membrane manufacturers have been working to clear that obstacle. There are some new cover boards out there on the market to try to also address some of that too. So a lot of new products and I guess tougher, more resilient type systems are needed sometimes to meet the standard.
80 mil membranes or fleece back TPO membranes. A lot of those have been tested and are starting to gain some approvals.
Right. That is a good point.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, maybe you could also talk about, I know Darren just brought it up and we talked about it before, the cover boards. I mean, there really are some updates on the cover board portion of this. What are you seeing around that?
Obviously, people are taking, there's a situation with single plies where there is you can only do so much with a membrane. Modifieds inherently have a benefit because of the fact they can add additional plies. And really, increase the mill thickness to where the cover board becomes more of a protected component as soon as they start layering thicker membranes and multiple plies. Even the introduction of an asphalt applied system, initially when we started seeing approvals, they were all hot applied everything. So the cover boards play, I think, more of an important role to the single ply industry than they do the modified industry, purely based off of what's covering the cover board. Obviously, Carlisle had a board about 8 months ago that started gaining some approvals, the EcoStorm VSH board. So that was a nice solution to obviously a gap in terms of a problem. And then obviously Georgia Pacific coming out with a new board, the StormX board. These are all products that are absolutely great, but until we have some form of an approval and tested and viable options from FM, everything just kind of is nice to know that it's coming, but we need practical solutions. So I worked in South Florida, and I always tried to bring new products to people, and they always said, show me the Miami-Dade NOA. And until you have that, don't tell me it exists.
Right.
So it's kind of one of those situations where we can see the marketing brochures, we can see that something's hit, and the claims can be, are yet to be substantiated. Where does it actually do what it says it's going to do? So I like seeing the testing. That provides me with some comfort that we have viable solutions that can help people meet this new requirement.
I think that is so key, and that's you'll see it on screen right now on the FM page, where you can go and you can look up the testing, you can look up the different systems, and it's really interesting too, because Georgia Pacific with their new StormX board, cover board, they just did a podcast, and they have information coming out there too. So I think there's a lot of good information that people can kind of start looking at these different systems and figuring out what works for them and what works in which region, which was interesting because that was one of our earlier questions, was also, how is this working across the country with FM? Are you hearing, Darren, are you hearing anything back from that on even though we may not have hail in the Pacific Northwest, we have some killer ice and trees falling on the roofs. What are you hearing that way?
Well, interesting. Yeah. And as Chris, your background was South Florida, and one of the big things there, of course, wind, but then you've got debris, you've got flying debris, you've got guys on the roof dropping toolboxes and panels off air conditioning units. So people sometimes are looking for the most resilient, tough roof that they can get. Not for hail, they may not be in Oklahoma or Texas, but they just want the most resilient, toughest impact resistant roof they can get. So they look to what's the highest impact standard out there, and they can build around that. We've seen a little bit of that elsewhere beyond the hail belt, if you will, where people are looking for a real defined standard that they can put in a spec. A little danger in that, you specify VSH, and if you're going to hold to that, then suddenly you've got a small selection of roofing to choose from. But like you alluded to, Chris, you can demonstrate that, it actually was put together and actually passed a test. So we are seeing this kind of creep in to other markets, other areas outside of the hail zones for folks that just are looking for a benchmark to specify for resistance, for hail impact resistance.
Well, and I want to remind everybody, please ask your questions. I mean, you've got the experts right here. And so, Aileen, I'd like to put this question towards you. It just came in. Hello from Fort Worth, Texas. This is from Melissa Simon. She says, if a building owner doesn't have the funds to replace a roof this year or in 2022, what are some inexpensive products that they can use to help this upcoming hail season? Are there any coatings?
Well, I'm not the coating expert, but maybe Chris can chime in. I'm not the coating expert.
What kind of systems are, and you'd kind of talked about that, and then we'll go to Chris. What kind of systems, because she's asking, would you recommend for some of those building owners? Because we know through COVID, there's some building owners, and I know you do mostly new construction, but as you're thinking about that, are there some alternatives for folks out there?
If they're looking to just to have hail protection, they could install a recover system with one of the hail rated boards and a single ply. That would be probably the most cost effective, other than a coating, to provide severe hail protection.
But, yes, go ahead, Chris.
Well, and it's trying to protect against hail is a little bit like trying to build for a tornado hitting your house. It's one of those items where you don't necessarily, there's not necessarily a solution beforehand, except for these, and that's why this has become an issue with the very severely hail rated systems. If they're concerned that much, I would urge them obviously to look at potentially a very severe hail rated roof system. And I would candidly make sure your roof is in a state where it doesn't have any glaring maintenance issues. And then if a storm does happen to pass through, I'd have a good partner in a roofing contractor that would be willing and able to respond if and when a hail event happens. But a coating or something along those lines, coatings are a good solution for a post hail event where there could be smaller hailstones that potentially damage the roof, and we're looking to make sure that we can continue the life of that roof. A coating's not going to protect you once you get to a point where the diameter of the stone is large enough to cause, deflection and light gauge sheet metal and things of that nature. So.
Very cool. We have some great questions coming in here. So we also have, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Chris, that you brought up Miami-Dade, but the question is, so this impact standard may apply to Florida, ? Does Miami-Dade do the testing using this standard, or can only FM do it? Can Darren post, this is actually from Bill, and I'm trying to get the rest of it. So let's start with that while I try to pull up the rest of that question. But is there anything that you're seeing, Darren, with Dade County working with FM, or are they kind of just like, their own worlds?
Right. Well, this is an FM test standard, and it's administered by FM. So to get the approval, you have to go through FM. It's strictly an FM approval. Now, doing developmental testing, there are several labs that can do this test, run this test. Now, you don't get the very severe hail rating because that's an FM rating. It's totally controlled by FM. But we have gone to other labs, third-party labs, and we've shot ice balls to see how things hold up. That right now we don't have FM approvals, but we're doing developmental testing to see what could potentially pass at FM, so we can then take it to FM. So we do a little pre-work. But your question about Miami-Dade County, no, there's no other entity that uses this FM very severe hail approval that publishes these kind of ratings anywhere that I'm aware of yet. It's strictly FM. It probably, well, there are also UL impact test standards, but they're different from this FM standard. So I think that covers your question about Miami-Dade. They don't have anything.
Yeah, I think it is important. There's like you said, there's going to be these different tests for different parts of the country, and we are seeing. I would like to, and we have another question here, but also just to make sure that we kind of talk about the redundancy of the very severe hail systems when it comes to foot traffic too. I mean, just when I realize that FM and you got to have it for the FM insured, but maybe Darren, just talk just a little bit more too about the what goes into the system, specifically your system, with to really make this so durable.
Okay, well, currently our approvals are focused on and limited to modified bitumen, and we're a modified bitumen company. We also have single ply membranes. We also offer PVC, and we have other materials, PMMA, our Alsan RS. It's a liquid applied material. Currently at FM, we're limited to modified bitumen, multiply, 2-ply. We have glass reinforced, fiberglass reinforced materials, as well as polyester reinforced materials. We've applied those over both our SOPREMA board, the board that we make, it's a 1/4 inch thick, and also over natural gypsum's Dex LFA 1/2 inch gypsum board. And those boards can be either adhered or fastened. So we were able to run the tests with the fasteners beneath the membrane. If our 2-ply modified bitumen, these are very resilient roofs. These are our standard roof systems there, that we didn't invent anything special for this test. They demonstrate the resilience of modified bitumen. They're pretty tough materials, pretty thick. When you put 2-plies down, you can put them over the stress plate and it can pass. Single ply a little different. We're still at FM, working towards the FM approval rating there. We're making some good headway there. We're also on developmental testing with our other materials. So it's a very slow process. I'll say this, I don't think anyone that I've talked to in the industry has been able to get through this process in less than a year. You have 1,000 hours between tests, and 1,000 hours of heat aging and accelerated weathering, and then you have to wait this scheduled time to get into FM and run your test, and it's just a very slow process. So that's another challenge for the industry, is just waiting for this inventory of approvals to build up, and it'll get there. It's just kind of slow going.
Yeah, I can see, Aileen, I can see you nodding.
Yes, we provided some systems with FM roof nav numbers to TBD and quite a few projects. So we've had to go that route because we've had to wait a year till the number was issued, even though the systems have been tested.
Wow. So that makes it a little bit challenging, but also one of the well, and before I go on to this next question, we do have a question here from Brian Randall, who says, are there any FM very severe ratings that use standard roof covers and cover boards?
Well, you say standard roof covers, yes. And as we've kind of talked about here, there's TPO, there's PVC, there's modified bitumen. So that's a lot of your standard products. Cover boards, that's when it gets a little smaller list. You're gonna there are several approvals with 1/2 inch and 5/8 inch gypsum boards. Some standard products like Natural Gypsum's Dex LFA is a standard product off the shelf. Our SOPREMA board also standard product. And then you've got these new products. I think Chris and Aileen were talking about a minute ago. Some new products that have come on the market to try to account for some obstacles with single ply.
Get the strength out there. So Chris, what are you seeing overall? We talked a little bit about this, but when you're looking at what's the appetite with the building owners in Dallas, and that you're looking at and estimating to really understand these programs, and how do you recommend other contractors to deliver this information in a way that makes sense?
Well, there's a distinct difference between a building owner and an institutional owner. An institutional owner is more likely to be an FM approved or an FM insured customer. So we're talking hospitals, Fortune 500 companies. These people generally have large capital budgets, and if you're looking to have that conversation with them, they're more about being compliant as a matter of the risk factor. The additional money is probably a drop in the bucket. So I'd say the conversation gets easier the more it's an institutional buyer and not necessarily a building owner. When you start getting into a building owner who has a few buildings, they want to do the best they can, and we get a lot of requests for a very severe hail rated option, but we price more than we sell. Let's just put it that way. So everybody thinks they have the intent to do as best as you can in terms of building components. When there's a cost associated with it that takes the project up 10 to 15%, it usually takes it off the table in terms of an option. So we just continue to present options as the testing and the assemblies get more available. I think you'll start seeing more economical options out there. And once we get to that point, I think you'll have people here that are in the hail belt that are choosing to do it as a matter of almost a matter of self-protection, almost a self-insurance. Well, okay, I'd rather, my deductibles, a high deductible plan, I'd rather spend an extra $50,000 and hopefully not have to file a claim. So we're learning along with everybody else most days. So, but it has been confusing in for some customers as to what this is and why everybody else around me is doing it, and should I do it too?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I love that idea of the proactiveness. If you, with the amount of hailstorms that you're seeing, that the country is seeing, sometimes this kind of proactiveness can pay for itself very easily, as you said, with high deductibles, and with the contractors kind of bringing that to the forefront, understanding how that insurance works. And Aileen, you mentioned earlier about architects and you working a lot with architects who are specifying it, and engineers. How are those conversations going with you working? I know you work with a lot of architects and you're kind of talking to them. Is there a lot of education on that front going on also?
Yes, and usually with me, it's one-on-one through a project. I'll talk with the general contractor and or the architect, trying to nail down systems, products, options. But it's just a learning process for all of us, and providing all the options that we can and the pricing that we can to fit their project. I know that KPost, we've had architects meet and discuss major issues and specifications, and I believe this has been one of them. So we try to educate on a larger scale than just one-on-one.
Yeah, you really do have to paint an entire picture for them, because a lot of the times we're starting from what is FM. I pulled this specification off the shelf. It's our standard spec, and what is FM? Why is what I picked more expensive? So we have to tell the whole narrative of how we got to this place as of 3 years ago when this very severe hail kind of became a thing. So,
and they seem willing to discuss it, which is nice. I mean, they seem very willing to want to understand and discuss and provide the correct systems. So that's been good. I think they've been receptive. I think general contractors and architects have been very receptive in discussing and talking their way through this process, because it has been confusing. Yeah. And
Darren, I know SOPREMA's been doing a lot of education with architects along with contractors. What are you seeing? What are some of the opportunities for people who are listening today to get more education on this and to really understand it? And what are you hearing back from the architectural and engineering communities?
Well, there's a difference between, of course, from the perspective of an architect, engineer, and an actual building owner. The architect and engineer don't occupy that building. They are there to they're representing the building owner, and sometimes there's maybe some disconnects. And you get some architects are just looking to get their ticket punched. They're putting a boilerplate spec out there and check that we've got the very severe hail or not. That's what they're looking at. Then you've got a building owner. He's got a little different perspective. Now, some building owners just need shade over their building. They just want to try to keep the rain off, and they don't want to. They're looking for the low cost option, and I understand that's certainly a huge part of the market. Then you've got building owners that are generally, like Chris was talking about earlier, Fortune 500s building owners that are FM insured. These are a different type building owner, generally speaking. FM, and a lot of people, I used to work for FM for 10 years, and FM insured are partners with FM. They're not there just looking for cheap insurance. It's more of a partnership. They don't want to have losses. They want to keep their buildings, they want their occupancies to continue to run during storm events and extreme exposures. they're looking for, they want that rating, but it's not just a rating. They want a resilient roof. They want a roof that's not going to blow off in a hurricane, a roof that's not going to get damaged every time we have a hailstorm, and so on and so forth. So this is just a test. And I think it's important to point out, this is nothing but a test. UL Class A, FM Class A is a fire test. Does that mean the roof's not going to catch on fire and burn, the building's not going to burn down? Maybe, no. It's a test. It's a test that exemplifies resilience. And when you go selecting materials and all you're basing it on is a test or an approval, I think sometimes you're going down the wrong path. If you are truly interested in resilience in your building and you don't want damage, you really want to look at, okay, what is really going to protect me? What is the most resilient roof that I can get? And even though you've got multiple tiers of FM very severe hail ratings, those all behave very differently. A 2-ply modified bitumen polyester that's 1/4-inch thick membrane is going to behave differently than a 60 or 80 mil single ply. It's going to pass the same test and same standard. So there's more. I think if you get to, it depends on who you're talking to. Talking to engineer architecture community, I run the gamut. It's some guys are there strictly. They want to know, okay, what's the most resilient roof? I'm representing my building owner, and he wants the most, or he or she wants the most resilient roof they can get. Or I just need to get through this project. It varies.
Yeah. And Aileen, you're nodding. You're seeing a lot of that same.
Oh yes, I mean he's right on because it's interesting because every building is different. Every building is different. Every scenario is different, and architects or designers tend to take, like Darren said, a boilerplate spec, and it's real important that, to me and to most estimators, that you give them what's going to really work on their building, and what you're given as a spec isn't always the best. And so it's every building's unique, and you know, some need more than a single ply, which tends to be the boilerplate a lot of times. It's, you know, 60 mil TPO. If it's a data center or there's a lot of foot traffic or there's a lot of mechanical, it needs to be a modified system. It needs to be something that can take the beating, and and not necessarily meet whatever test they have in the spec. I think every project needs to be looked at uniquely, and hopefully you get either the designer's ear or the owner's ear, and you can educate them through the process and give them what they really need to have on that building.
That's so cool. And Chris, I know we talked about earlier before that, so on the estimating side, where both you and Aileen are, but also on the sales side and on the marketing side, for a lot of the contractors who are listening here, how you are using, and I love that, you know, the redundancy, the resiliency of a really strong roof, whether it's data centers or hospitals or whatever. But how's your sales team at KPost kind of positioning this very severe hail as they're going out and selling?
Well, step one's identifying, right? So there is a difference, obviously, between FM requires you to go through a review process on the X2688 form for any proposed roof system for an FM insured customer. Step one's figure out who those guys are. They're most of the time, if you're an FM customer, they know. You ask them the question, the answer is yes. Generally, if you're getting an answer of, well, I'm not sure, I'll have to look into it, that generally means you haven't dealt with it and you're probably not an FM customer. We're not actively changing or altering any of our sales tactics. What we're doing from our side as the technical experts in estimating is familiarizing ourselves with the commonalities between all these testings and kind of figuring out where the gates are to successfully deliver an installable roof system. So that becomes, if we're confident in the solution, that becomes a selling tool, obviously, for our salespeople. So in that regard, I think we're a solutions provider for our customers. So the estimating staff here is where it changes from hypothetical to actual. We're now implementing a plan where we're going to go execute something. So we need to make sure that it's sellable and achievable in terms of checking all the boxes for testing. So that really is the only sales strategy. I'd say for everybody listening, just familiarize yourself with the actual what very severe hail is, the assemblies that are currently in place, and keep a finger on the pulse of those that are coming out, because there are more and more that are getting approved as time goes. So, and then just, correctly identifying and help customers identify when they are or aren't an FM insured customer. So.
Through there. So I just have to ask this too, because when we were there last year for the IRE, we saw some of the equipment, and I hope I'm going to say this right, the Macadin, that is helping to install on the rooftops. And I know KPost is doing a lot of that with mod bits, along with these systems. So can you talk a little bit just to what the appetite of the audience out there? There's a lot going on, understanding the testing, understanding the systems, but then you have done huge amounts also on installing them and being able to install them quickly with less labor. Chris, maybe you can talk about that for just a second.
Well, so everybody's has a lot of the same variables in terms of cost. So, and a lot of the manufacturers have identified that and people are selling to efficiency tools. They're the hardest thing to sell because they're unproven until they are. So a piece of equipment like a mini Macadin is basically a modified roll installer, an automated modified roll installer. So it helps with a few items. It does help with installation speed, but also the end product. It's more of a mechanized installation procedure now. So there's no the timing of having a skilled guy on the torch is different. That variable's removed. The amount of propane, how heavy his trigger finger is on the torch. All these things are really just standardized. So it affords us a little bit of increased production. It affords us a little bit of more consistency, and there is some cost savings in regards to the fuel itself. So. Efficiency tools are very interesting. Like I said, I'm the biggest skeptic because we have some very, very skilled tradesmen that are very, very efficient in what they do. And if you're going to tell me that you're going to make them obsolete, I have a hard time believing it, because there's still an art to it. So we'll let you show us just about anything, and we'll buy probably about just about nothing from you from an efficiency tool. So.
But I love the fact too is that this is coming out. I know SOPREMA brought the Macadin in, and so to hit so many of these different areas across the board of building these roofs that can withstand hail. I mean, that's really what it's all coming down to.
Right.
Darren, as you're looking at that too, kind of putting those systems together, passing the test, everything you're doing on testing, but then also on the other side, productivity and really kind of getting some solutions. What are you hearing back from contractors across the country about this?
Well, with regard to very severe hail, I'll keep it in that framework. Our goal, again, was to go in and test our standard systems. We didn't want to come up with anything new. We wanted to have all of our traditional cold applied, torch applied, asphalt applied, all the materials and methods and the sheets that we currently have. We wanted to have those all approved or tested, evaluated. First, just to demonstrate that these traditional membranes would meet this new standard. And so we went through all the systems, and then we started looking at the cover boards, and the cover boards turned out to be one of the biggest challenges. But as far as efficiencies, again, we wanted to make sure that that everything that the contractors are normally used to installing, the typical methods, we wanted to just drop in this very severe hail rating in with these systems. And that's what we've been chipping away at. Unfortunately, COVID-19 kind of got in the way. We would have been a lot further ahead at FM with regard to this rating. But FM for the last year, the last time I was at FM, ironically, was this week, last year. I left FM, came home, and that was it. Well, we were doing very severe hail testing there, in fact, in March of last year. But with efficiencies, though, again, just looking to get traditional systems approved. And Another key was getting fastened and adhered boards, because you got to remember this very severe hail rating is hail, but it's a whole rating. It's not just, okay, hail rating. You've got to have the fire, you've got to have the wind uplift. And to get the wind uplift, sometimes adhering all components, adhering all the boards, you're not going to get your super high wind uplift ratings with adhesives adhering all the board components. So you have to use some fastening, sometimes just in perimeters and corners of a roof, but you're going to have to employ stress plate and a fastener most times, or oftentimes, for high wind zones. So that was another thing we were looking for I'll say efficiencies, which was more just to say we can accommodate, or try to accommodate the market by saying, yes, we have very severe hail, traditional systems, traditional application methods, and all the components that are currently available in the market, and try to stay away from having to develop new products and introduce those into the mix.
That's a lot. So Darren, what do you see for the future of like, I love how you said a year ago I left FM and I haven't been back yet. Now you have, what do you see happening over the next year, especially as people start, you're able to get back in there? What kind of testing, what's on the horizon?
Well, there's a huge pent up demand for approvals and testing. We constantly develop new things. We want to build and expand upon our approvals, such as the very severe hail. So we've got some programs that are, in the hopper waiting to be tested. A lot of wind uplift items. As you may be aware, in some jurisdictions and states in the U.S., they're adopting ASC 716, the latest version of ASC 7. That's a higher wind requirement. FM has adopted basically this standard as well. Well, not exactly, but their wind uplift requirements have stepped up a bit as well. And so the combination of higher wind uplift rating demands and this very severe hail demand, things like that. So these things are kind of flying under the radar, I think, in a lot of the markets. They're not really, a lot of folks aren't seeing this. South Florida, or Florida in general, has just adopted this ASC 716. A lot of demand for more resilient, wind resistant systems. We, SOPREMA, are always trying to lead that and get ahead of all those demands. There's the whole climate change debate has necessitated stronger, more resilient roofing systems, and so as far as the future goes, and the present for that matter, we're constantly chipping away and testing and expanding our approvals.
The wind, I mean, just the weather has been so crazy. So I think I really want to kind of maybe have Aileen and Chris share just a little bit. What have you seen? I mean, I know this is a little bit away from the approvals and everything like that, but everybody loves weather. So with everything you went through with the ice and the cold and the storms, what are you hearing about your storm season? What are some of the things that are happening just around that whole topic of crazy weather down there in Texas? Chris, you want to just kind of?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
What's happening down there?
Well, so anytime, we're going to get no sympathy from the northern states if they're in attendance here, but we got a whopping 6 inches of snow that lasted for 4 days, and so now the hot topic is snow retention, which we rarely need, and every time we try to enlist it, it usually ends up hurting something else. So I think the storm season here, I mean, who knows what's to come. I haven't looked at the Farmer's Almanac. I do know that it's probably going to be an active one. There's already talk of a low front in California right now that's causing some issues. So, if anything's for sure, it's that Texas weather is going to be crazy. We go from 70 to -5 up to 30, up to 70 again within a time frame of a week. So we're just waiting for whatever's next, and that's all you can do. And many people obviously have the same situation in their parts of the country. So, it can be a tool for sales. It can be an opportunity. I don't like natural events. They throw off the cycle of roofing for me. You know, and I want to roof a building and in 20 years call the guy back and say it's about time for you to roof it again. I don't want to eat my dinner, you know, for lunch type of situation.
I think a big thing with Texas weather is inspections, annual inspections, inspect for weather events, and servicing after weather events. I mean, our service department is probably overwhelmed right now with, you know, with damages from the last, you know, 2 weeks ago. So I think that's real important in Texas. I think inspections are crucial because the weather does fluctuate so severely, and then making sure that everyone's roofs are serviced, you know, and repairs are made. So
yeah, the weather's only gonna, it seems to only be continuing. We keep hearing, and it's going to be everywhere. Colorado, I mean, it has huge hail, but we're seeing it in places that we haven't before. So for all of you listening on here, I think this is something to be, if you're not in the hail belt, trust me, it's still going to be affecting you, and it's going to be coming your way because there's a lot going on. So Darren, as we wrap up, any last words on what people should be, you know, doing right now?
Well, I think Aileen made a good point too, as far as maintenance. It's so important. We, like all other manufacturers, we try to emphasize in our warranty requirements that the roofs be inspected and maintained on a routine basis. And it's sad sometimes to see that there's so much pushback. A building owner puts less emphasis in their low slope roofing system than they do in the parking lot. You know, they do. They spend so much in maintaining their grounds and yard and parking lot and things like that, and put very little emphasis and want to just put a roof on and hands off for 20 years, and not realistic. So we certainly recommend contractors preventive maintenance programs, and we recommend owners to engage in their the roofing contracting community and contract with them to have routine maintenance inspections and repairs. So that's very important.
I think that is great advice to end on. Know your codes, go to do the education. We had a question up here saying they wanted to be sure, Darren, to post your contact information, and so we will make sure that we have that available. But why don't you just shout out your email address so that if people want to get a hold of you?
Yes, it's D Perry, it's DPERRY at SOPREMA, SOPREMA.us.
Awesome.
And,
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say real quickly, I did a video recently that explains very severe hail, and it actually shows the pneumatic cannon shooting an ice ball at the samples, and it's pretty interesting. If you're interested in learning more about very severe hail, you can just Google SOPREMA VSH and it'll pop up. And you can go on our website and get it through there. Or I think you say the Roofers Coffee Shop also had a link to that too.
Yes. So we're going to have all of that. We'll have Darren's information available. We're going to have that new video. It's going to be on the directory, SOPREMA's directory, so that anybody can find it. And then this gets you there to find the information. We'll also have the FM links. So just to make it really simple for everyone. So all of you, Aileen, Darren, Chris, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for your wisdom and your information that I know is going to help so many people out there.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening and for being here today on this Coffee Conversations. I mean, there's nothing better than very severe hail. I'm telling you, this is like it is such a huge issue for us in roofing. And I want to invite all of you back to 2 weeks from today. We're very excited. We are going to have Christy Holbrook of Graham Roofing with her intern, Jasmine Melton, who is going to be, I'm reading this the right way, the first African-American female graduate from the Mississippi State University's Building Construction and Science program.
Wow.
Is that cool? I know. I'm so excited. Look, Aileen, we're going to be back together in 2 weeks. So it's going to all be about recruiting, and it's going to be about really getting involved with the VOTEX and the universities and really bringing this great talent that's coming out in this next generation into roofing. So I want to welcome all of you. Please register. Thank you again, all of you, for on the very severe hail. This has just been so informative. Everyone out there, have a great day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.